right. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Get Your Head in the Game podcast. I am your host, Dr. Jenna Ross, and I am a certified mental performance consultant and a mental health counselor. And today I would like to introduce my guest, Murph. Kelly Murphy. Super special to have him on. He brings a different background than the typical athlete. He is actually a veteran. Marine Corps veteran of 22 years. So from one veteran to another, I just want to say thank you for your service. And I am excited to have you on and share your journey through 22 years of serving and now transitioning out of that to do great things to help other veterans, as well as just coaching and training and helping people with their health. And being on the show Tough as Nails, you were the winner for season 1 of Tough as Nails, and which is now in its 4th season. And so we are going to talk today all about mental toughness, mindset, and what it really means to be mentally tough. So Murph, thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And thank you for your service as well.
Thank you. Yeah, so tell me, you started out as a Marine, how many years ago was that now?
Well, I joined in 1990.
Okay.
I was in English class of my senior year right before lunch. And it was February. One of my friends turned around and said, "What are you doing after school today?" And I said, "Nothing." He's like, "Why don't you talk to the Marine Corps recruiter with me?" And I thought, wow, Vernon's really looking out for me. That's pretty cool. Well, it turns out Vernon was just looking for 2 people to join under his name so he can get promoted out of boot camp. But at the time, I'm like, cool, looking out for his friend. Anyway, we talked to the recruiter that day, and talking to the Marine Corps recruiter was a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
He basically said, "Why should I let you join my Marine Corps?" I was like, wow, I didn't know what to think. I've never had a recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting there as a 17-year-old trying to convince this sergeant of Marines why I'm good enough to be in the Marine Corps. So I'm selling myself basically and on why I should be a Marine. And I left that day. I went home and told my parents that night. And that Friday, I enlisted in the Marine Corps for 6 years. So
Wow.
kind of how I got started.
So what did you say? How did you sell yourself to this recruiter? I'm curious.
I was just trying to say, I'm not the most physical person. I didn't start playing sports until I was a junior in high school, but I had a coach that took me under his wing to try to get me, physically ready to play. And, I proved to the coach that I was dedicated by going and lifting weights before school. So I was trying to explain like the kind of dedication I had to that coach, and keeping commitments is the same thing I would do in the Marine Corps. And I'm sure I told him all kinds of stuff about how I studied hard, which, well, depending upon what the subject was, maybe. But I found myself, really convincing myself why I should join. So it was a very good sales tactic, for lack of better words.
Wow,
So,
that's incredible. And then you ended up in for 6 years.
yes. And then, so I was in for my first enlistment was 6. When I was first in, I did avionics on Hueys and Cobras, 2 different types of helicopters the Marine Corps has. And before I knew it, my first enlistment was up, do a couple deployments overseas. And then before you know it, it's time to re-enlist. So I re-enlisted again for 4 years. Did some time as an instructor. So I taught young Marines now how to do the maintenance on aircraft. Re-enlisted again. And this time I found myself on recruiting duty. So
Hmm.
now I was a recruiter for 3 years. Going out there in the community, talking to the young men, young women about the Marine Corps, doing the same thing that recruiters still do to this time, finding young men and young qualified women for their branch of service. Went back to Camp Pendleton after that, went back to helicopter squadron. And then my career changed a little. I got promoted to first sergeant. And in the Marine Corps, first sergeant is a rank. I know in some branches it's kind of like a billet, but the Marine Corps has 2 different types of E8s. So I got selected to first sergeant, and I spent my next 4 years, 3 years with the infantry battalion. Did a couple deployments with 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. Ended up having to go somewhere non-deployable for a year because Marine Corps tries to take you out of the fight, so to speak. So I got Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, which is a big training base. I was down there for about a year. And I knew that if I stayed in, I'd be deploying again. At the time, my oldest child was in 6th grade. And I knew that if I re-enlisted, I'd be deploying and missing more of their life. So I made the decision to retire at 22 years. Otherwise, I was going the full 30. I mean, that was my dream and that was the plan. But like I said, I knew I had a decision to make. It was either continue the next 8 years and fulfill everything I wanted to in the Marine Corps, or make sure that I'm there for the kids. So I chose there to be there for them. And I liked Missouri. It was a great area. So I focused on job hunt in the Missouri area, and that's how I ended up staying in Missouri.
Wow. That's quite the journey. I want to go back for a minute to, as a 17-year-old, like, do you ever remember being like afraid or scared, or like what were some of your thoughts? I mean, that's a big deal as a 17-year-old to make that type of decision, to, join the service, move away from home. Like what was going through your mind at the time, if you remember?
Well, I was a kind of a nerdy kid. I wasn't really an athlete, but I liked sports. So I'd never, I played like Little League baseball when I was probably in elementary school. And in 6th grade, I tried football, but I just wasn't good at it. And so I didn't do any really sports again until high school. I had a coach that was a former Marine. He was a big man, 6'4", 200 plus pounds, Cherokee Indian. He was a very instrumental coach in a lot of our lives. And he talked to me about a bunch of different things. And one of the things he talked to me about was commitment, doing things scared, trying new things. Don't be afraid to fail, because that's how we grow. And he talked to me a little bit about the Marine Corps. And I also had, prior to that, I delivered newspapers on my bicycle in that small town in Indiana. And so a few of my customers were Marine veterans. And, I got to talk to them about the military and things of that nature. So and my dad was a Vietnam veteran. So I had a lot of veterans influence me. So the decision to join the military that part wasn't scary, because I felt like I was well educated on what the military was about. So I wasn't really too scared about making the decision, because I think I did all my homework, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that does make sense. And having the people around you as a positive influence for that, I'm sure it was definitely a factor in that. So was there ever, if you look back at your career, I mean, quite the extensive career, do you ever recall any point, being scared of what was coming next, or having that thought at all in your head?
Oh yeah, I mean, getting ready to go to boot camp, I'm scared to death, because you see about how hard boot camp is. So, there's a lot of self-talk going on. Did I make the right decision? Then you're like, yeah, I did. And then another day goes by, it gets closer, and now you're at the airport, and then like you're sitting Indian style or cross-legged inside the airport in San Diego waiting for the bus to pick you up. And now you're really scared and second self. And then before you know it, you're on the bus, and the drill instructor gets on the bus, and just like all the videos, the first out of your mouth will be, "Sir, do you understand me?" And you're screaming at the top of your lungs. And then they're like yelling at you, get off the bus. So boot camp is just, you're living in almost every day, because every day is something different. I think no matter what branch of service you're in, boot camp helps you adjust to the ever changing. You get scared, you kind of learn a little bit at a time how to deal with those different situations. And then, of course, overseas, the fear of the unknown, doing different things. Maybe you're picking up a weapon system you never fired before. So you're, nervous or scared to do it. But you also rely on your training a lot in the military, to help overcome that's fear.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so not boot camp. I know for me at least, I know what that's like is, it's intentional, right? They intentionally put you in that state of mind so that you learn how can you adapt and overcome stressful situations. That's the entire idea behind boot camp. So do you feel like that kind of prepared you essentially for life?
I think it prepares you for the next stage of life.
Mm.
Um, because I think what happens, I know you start off as, a young person in the military, and now you go to your first duty station, and now you're scared because, you're going to a new location, you don't know anybody, so it's the fear of the unknown. Then you get comfortable a little, you meet a few people, you get to know your job, you feel more comfortable, and maybe you're starting to do some, you get put in maybe a small leadership position, maybe where you're in charge of a project, or maybe you're in charge of just a couple people. And then now you get promoted, and now maybe there's the fear because now you are doing a different job, or maybe a job on a more grand scale, or maybe you're in charge of way more people than you ever have been. Then you learn that, and then you master that, and maybe another change comes, and now maybe you're doing a different duty. So I think the military does prepare you for life when it comes to helping you adjust to change. You really learn how to grow in the military because you do so many different things. You're doing your job, but maybe you're doing a different job. You get tasked with other things.
Mm-hmm.
You get to meet a wide variety of people. Like the military is the great melting pot for the United
It's
States.
true.
Now
Very
you're
true.
working with people you've never worked around before. Um, you're learning to, like, maybe how to talk to people that you've never talked to before when it comes to, like, not at work, but maybe you're off work and they're using terms you've never used before, maybe different lingo, different verbiage and stuff like that. But I think it really prepares you for life because you get to really meet so many different people from so many different walks of life.
Yeah, and like they always say, the only constant is change. That's the only thing in life that we can expect is that there will be change, right?
That's very
So,
true.
so real quick, I'm just going to tell people if anybody just jumped on and is listening, this is Murph. He is a 22-year Marine Corps veteran, and we have him on here today to talk about mental toughness and his journey through serving and life after service, what he's done. And yeah, so now, you spent so much time in the service. What was it like to transition out of that?
Uh, that was almost scarier than going to boot camp.
Mhm.
So, I went in the Marine Corps I enlisted when I was 17. By the time I shipped to boot camp, I was 18. When I retired, I was 40. So I spent 22 years as an adult, like, so 22 years, so more than my half my life has
Mhm.
been. So it was very scary. Like, what am I going to do? So everything changes in your life. You go from wearing a uniform to now you have to pick out what clothes I'm going to wear on a daily basis. You know, my work schedule going to change. So what I learned over time is that everything in my life absolutely changed when I retired. The only thing that didn't change is physical fitness. That's the one thing that I relied on to be a constant. And I talk about that to a few veterans. They're like, what's the one thing, the piece of advice that you would give somebody transitioning? I'm like, pick one thing that that's going to be a constant in your life, because that's the one thing that you can count on. Because, like I just mentioned, my clothing changed. The time I went to work changed. All my job duties changed. Um,
Mhm.
the amount of time it takes me to get to work changed. But the one thing that I can count on that wouldn't change was, physical fitness, doing
Mhm.
that stuff. So that's the one thing that I I used as a constant during my transition. Um,
Right.
and So I think it's important just to pick the one thing. But to answer your question, the transitioning was scary because, um, I didn't know where to start. So I went to the transition seminars that the military offered. I went to some resume writing classes. I started early. So when I did decide to retire, I started applying for jobs right away. So, and it was a lot harder than I thought it would be. I thought send out some resumes, I'll get some interviews. I think I applied to 66 different jobs to get 3 interviews, and none of those interviews netted me a job.
Oh
Um,
man, yeah. I could say the same thing. I just transitioned in July and I'm starting a business, so I am also in that place where I applied for some part-time things and I've probably filled out in the last 6 months about 33 applications and not one, right? So that is for sure a huge obstacle.
yeah, so what I talked to veterans, so I was able to finish my master's degree when I was still on active duty.
Mm.
Um, and I talked to some veterans, and they're like, "Well, I'm going to wait till I retire to go back to school." I would start as fast as possible, and if you can take classes while you're in, then do so. Because yes, there are a lot of companies that love to hire veterans, but there's veterans that are getting out every day. Are you a veteran getting out? Do you have your technical schooling required? It doesn't have to be college, it's whatever your career field in. But is there any kind of extra education that you can get to put on your resume that is going to make you stand out a little bit more than that next veteran?
Mhm.
And start your networking. That's how I ended up getting my first job upon retirement, is because I talked to a guy that was with the company. He's like, "Well, let me talk to my boss." So I really got my first interview because another Marine knew somebody else that was in the hiring position, and they looked at my resume and then took me in for the interview. So as prepared as I thought I was, like, those interviews didn't get me a job. It was because I got it through networking. So like, now's the time for you to call your friends, let them know, "Hey, I'm retiring. Do you know of anybody? Is your company looking for anything?" um, kind of do it that way a little bit.
Wow. Yeah, uh quite probably a wake up moment to realize like, hey, this is a little more challenging. Through that, did you ever find yourself struggling mentally or having any kind of mental health struggles through that transition or even in the military?
Oh, so when like I mentioned earlier, I retired at 22. My intent was to go for the full 30. So when I retired, I talk about this on some other podcasts I've been on. So this is the wrong way to do it. I saw everything the military had. When I moved up to this community, I didn't join the VFW, the American Legion. Um, I didn't even let people know that I was like really retired Marine. Um, I just wanted to separate myself totally from the military. I didn't want to go to military functions or anything like that because I was afraid that if I was part of that, I would miss it even more.
Mm.
So I kind of just separated myself from the military in general. And I struggled. Probably, if I would say about 5 years ago, I had to go see a counselor because, as well as I thought I was adjusting, I wasn't. So I went and saw a counselor. They helped me through some struggles I was having. Um, and I'm not afraid to say that because we all struggle at different times. Um, I was 5 years into retirement, thought I was doing well. Then one day I just crashed. So I made an appointment, saw a counselor several times just to kind of it was just somebody that didn't know me.
Mhm.
And, it was just a chance for me to talk to them. So even if it's just to talk to somebody to work through things out loud, you know,
Yeah.
um, and then, and that's kind of why, um, I did the show. Um,
Hmm.
they, I don't watch much TV, and it's a long story. I was kind of found through social media, and that's kind of how I got started on the show. But once I found about the show, I'm like, man, this is a chance for me to prove to myself that I could still do and bring it like I did when I was in the Marine Corps. So when Phil, we did some Zoom calls for casting, and Phil's like, why do you want to be on the show? I said, well, because I want to prove to myself that I can still bring it like I did in the Marine Corps. And when I was on the show, um, it almost felt like being in the military, in the fact that you, in a short, so like when you go to a different unit, you have to get to know those people as quickly as you can to accomplish a mission. In this case, I had to get to know my fellow contestants as quickly as possible to accomplish a job. And while you're on set, the whole time you're there, you don't have your cell phone, no laptop. So it's just you and those people getting to know each other, just like a military deployment, no outside distractions. So we bonded really quickly. It almost felt like I was in the military again when it came to those aspects. And the show made me feel like I was in the military again when it comes to that. And the show, I won't say it healed me, but for lack of better words, it made me laugh again. I was having fun again. People noticed a change when I got back from filming, because they're like, who's this? You're a little different. I'm jovial speaking. I was acting like I was in the military again, having fun, and people a difference. So the shows definitely came in my life at the right time.
So going back to something you said earlier, you said you were 5 years into retirement and then just kind of woke up and crashed. What did that feel like? Like, what was that like for you? I know so many times, we may be experiencing challenges in our life, but we don't necessarily recognize the signs of something like anxiety or something like depression until it gets to that point. So like for you, what did that feel like and what was that like?
Yeah, it was like despair, like something triggered it, something personal, and um, I just felt like I didn't know who I was, like why doing this job, like that. I enjoyed the job that I did, but it wasn't the same as being in the military. And I'm like, why am I doing this? Why did I stop? And then I'm like, well, I did it for the right reason. I just second guessing myself. And then I just found, like, I started crying, and like, this is weird. I've never had these kind of feelings just come out like this. And then I found myself, going to bed that night and then waking up a gazillion times at night, like wondering what was going on. The next day I felt discouraged, and I need to talk to somebody, because I've never had these intense feelings like this before. So I'm sure it was more a couple days from what I remember. It just about a week's worth of like really second guessing myself, feeling like you have no answers, but you don't even know what the question is.
Hmm. 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 So all throughout the military, did you ever, I know at least my experience in the military, they always talk on, suicide prevention and resiliency, and there's all these programs that they have. Did any of that come to your mind when you were going through this, or was it just kind of your own realization?
Maybe somewhere in the back of my mind, that stuff comes to life. I use I was in a position a few years ago to provide CPR um, to somebody, and you go to his gazillion CPR classes in the military, and you're like, okay, chest compressions, got it. You kind of you joke about the training and you don't take it serious sometimes when you're sitting there. But when I got on that my friend's chest and actually was doing real chest compressions, that stuff, my hands locked like they were supposed to, arms straight. I'm doing everything mechanically just like I learned. And I think maybe, those classes that I had for the mental awareness, that could have clicked in. And that's why I, went and saw somebody.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. And that's kind of why, I think it's important for us to talk about it, is because for people that are listening to this, it can happen to anybody, really. Like, taking you, for example, are athletes, right? Where you have overcome so much in your life and proven yourself as far as when it comes to challenges, mentally tough. Like I look at you, the reason I invited you on this podcast was because I was like, he is kind of like the ideal of mental toughness. I mean, you went on the show Tough as Nails. You spent 22 years in the Marines, yet to be able to say that at some point you also felt um some of those signs and symptoms of having a struggle, a mental health struggle, I think brings it to the reality of like this does happen and that it's okay to seek help and to speak up, right? It doesn't mean we're less of a person. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know, if people are listening, to be able to hear that coming from you is very powerful.
Yeah, well, thank you. I just know that, I just hope that if somebody's in a situation, they do talk to somebody and know that there's no need to be embarrassed about it, because we all have a breaking point or a struggle, and you just don't know when that's going to come about. And if it does, just know that you're supported by other people, and nobody's going to judge you for seeking help. You know, we'd rather you seek the help than not be here anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So, for moving forward from that, and you found this show and the show kind of gave you that hope back, gave you that part of you that you felt like was missing. How did you won the show? So how did you succeed and what was that like?
Well, it was an amazing experience. They said that I'm still friends with all of my fellow, cast members of the show. We have a group message. The team that I was on, we still communicate with each other. I'm still talk to several people from the other team, but it was just the show is really it's just amazing. People ask me what's the script like, and I'm like, there's no script. The host of the show basically just said, be yourself and do this stuff the best you can. So the show is 100% real. There's nothing fake about it, and that's what makes it so great. Is that what people see on TV is real. So when they see us struggling or arguing, that's real. When they see us growing together, communicating, learning each other, um, growing friendships, that's real. So that part was very cool. Like I said, it reminded me of being in the military. Some of the challenges you thought that you could do really well at were hard, and vice versa. Some of the stuff that you thought would be hard was easy, and it was just an amazing experience. Just and to learn also how TV works a little bit, because while you're there, you get to talk to the cameraman, the audio techs, the producers, so you kind of learn how all this stuff gets together. So that part was an amazing experience too, getting to learn a little bit about everybody's trade on the show and what they do, and that they have other projects that they work on. So it was just an amazing experience all the way around. And then to represent the veteran community was, I was the first veteran on the show, so just a chance to represent the veteran community. And because of the show, I get to do other things now to help promote veteran affairs. I do some speaking to different groups. I've done a handful of podcasts talking about mental awareness, mental health to veterans. And then I get to tie in with the community. So, for example, there's several business owners in this community that have reached out to me and said, hey, Murph, if you know a veteran that's in need, let us know. We'll take care of them. But we don't want it advertised. We don't want anybody to know about it. And that's an amazing and they're not veterans. They just want to give back to their community. So I've got to do stuff like that to help people in the community. And it's all behind the scenes. Nobody knows about it. Veterans get taken care of without publicity, because we don't want anybody to get embarrassed, and the business owners don't want any credit. So,
Wow.
excuse me, show like I wouldn't have that kind of, you know, opportunity if it wasn't for being on the show.
Wow. That's incredible. Like the doors just open, right? Like it's interesting because you think of the timing of what you've described and being in this place of darkness and, getting the help that you need and then finding the show and now there's opportunities. And it's kind of like, if we were to give up in that moment, none of that would happen. And so it's, we don't see it when we're in it, right? It's hard to see that when you're blinded by those things, but looking back now you see how pushing through that, getting the help you need, overcoming it, finding that hope, and now you have the opportunity to kind of make an impact and give back. And like I think that's the beautiful thing about for anybody that's struggling is like that's not the end. That's not the end. Like there's so much more if you just keep pushing and keep going. So I love that you share your entire journey because it really paints a beautiful picture of what it looks like to push through and to have that mental toughness in those tough moments.
Well, thanks. I definitely try. I mean, I think life, we learn a little bit new. We learn a little bit about ourselves every day. So, but I think,
Sure.
after the season finale, the governor of Missouri invited me to the Capitol. So I took my son with me. So we got to meet the governor. We got to meet several members of the House committee, and several representatives from the state gave me their personal cell phone number and said, "Hey, we sit on veterans committees. If you know of something veteran related that needs addressed, reach out to me directly." Now, Kelly Murphy isn't going to get that kind of pull, but Murph from Tough as Nails, is the reason I have that opportunity. They wouldn't reach out to me, but now because of the show, I get to do stuff and like help people that I wouldn't normally get to help with if I didn't, wasn't on the show anyway.
Wow. Amazing. So what advice would you give to, maybe the younger generation or just anybody about, really working towards your dreams and what it looks like to be mentally tough and to be successful?
I'd say the first thing is don't be afraid to fail, because sometimes we learn more about ourselves during failures than we do the successes. And two, never give up. That's the biggest thing I talk to young kids about is if you have an opportunity, take it, because I'd rather spend the rest of my life going, okay, I was great at that, I sucked at that, I failed at that, than to spend the rest of my life going, well, I wonder what happens if. I don't want to have the if. So I've like, so I do modeling like on the side. So because that was the show that a lady reached out to me, said, "Hey, would you like to try modeling?" I'm like, "No." She's like, "Come on." So I'm like, "Okay, I'm listening to my own words, give it a shot." Well, by the end of the day, I was offered like um, the job again. So I've done modeling a few times for this company. I was asked if I would like to try a role on TV. So I was given a script by a producer, and I've taken some acting classes, and I'm horrible at it so far. So acting may not be my jam, but I'm trying it because it's an opportunity. And like I said, when it's all said and done, if I fail at it and I'm not good at it, at least I know I tried. But
Yeah.
I'd rather know at the end of the day that that's not for me than to go, man, I wonder what would have happened if I did that. So that's tell young kids, just don't pass up opportunities, because you never know where the opportunity will lead and what that opportunity will lead to.
Oh, for sure. It's kind of like the pain of risk or the pain of regret. Which one do you want?
Yeah.
So go for it, and you never know. Even if you fail, you learn something, right? There's always something to be learned.
Yep, I agree.
Wow. So awesome. Any last words that you want to share with people listening?
No, I hope that if people are struggling, they talk to somebody, even if it's just a friend, or if it's, just a service that they can call, just reach out, because it could be a life-changing experience, just getting it off your chest.
Absolutely. So if somebody was going to connect with you or find you, how would they do that?
I used Instagram for almost everything. So through my Instagram account, KWMURPH72, send a message that way. I reach out on one of the posts. I just use that as my medium. I have a Twitter account. I just started it when the show came out just to kind of support the show, but I don't use it very often. So definitely is.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I definitely appreciate you sharing and giving us some tips, and your journey and your story is a powerful one. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.